What brings me to the street today? Well, is to try to draw attention that the challenge that we're facing trying to bring in the new legislation as it pertains to retail cannabis sales, the legal retail cannabis sales in our community. Well, I could be very blunt and say the only thing that really has changed are the laws. There is so much residue left over from the prohibition and the propaganda that we really struggle with that. There's no doubt about it. But on an upside, I mean, that is, of course, I think what we need to deal with. But on a real positive upside, what I've come to see within the community, within our stores, is what I was touching on a little earlier about the attitude. That's been the greatest change, I think, is how Canadians are seeing each other. There was a sense of fear and trepidation regarding if you had a neighbor that smoked marijuana or whatever. Today, I really believe that there is an erosion of that stigma, at least on a community level, person to person. The great struggle that really remains is having to do with something that's a bit more political. It has to do with those that previously were the administrators of prohibition. And I'm talking about local municipalities, the local governance. These are the individuals that are still struggling with the changes. And, you know, I'm very respectful of that. You know, they were on the front line. They'd been led to believe a lot of mistruths. And with the laws being changed, nobody has come in and actually chosen to illuminate for them that some of what they might have believed has been changed by knowledge, by science, by time. And I think that is really what we need to do now, is to begin the re-education process. You know, I don't think it's enough to just be angry at these individuals. I don't think that seems to be an approach many are taking. I think it's really about trying to help them understand that their fears that they once had can now be alleviated by allowing for the retail cannabis sales. My hope in bringing this out is to bring about interest within the community to this, broaden the dialogue, and ultimately to gain a sense of how the community feels. You know, to be fair to say, there was a time when I would stand out here on the streets, let's say 5 years ago, and it would have been much more hostile. People may have sworn at me or spit at me or mistreated me. It's very truthful. Where today I'm out here and people drive by and wave, smile, know who I am. Also have come to appreciate what the issue really is. That has been sort of a very large discussion point while I'm out here on the streets, is people say, well, but it's legal, so why can't we have it? So, and these are people that say, it's not that I use, but they're conflicted by how something can be legal, yet we can't actually access it in the community. We have something that's legal, but now people still have to turn to a black market. Some of the challenges that we're facing here in British Columbia, the Germain report recently talking about money laundering. We just looked into $7 billion that was flooded into exotic cars and into the housing market. So it's not that we don't have enough reasons to look to try to go down another path. I mean, we're all being very, very deeply affected and impacted on by the lack of action in terms of controlling the profits that are being dragged out by organized crime. You know, we've taken this view of what we're going to do is we're going to try to stop people from using it, some sort of strange form of interdiction, when really the big struggle is this other variable. You know, we need to examine that. It's the policies. You know, I mean, I can look at, okay, there's the user, there is the substance, but behind it, there's this mitigating variable, and it are the policies. They failed miserably. Courts have examined them at a federal level and have come to understand they lack all integrity and really ought to be torn down. That is what led to cannabis going through the process that it did. It wasn't that all of a sudden the federal government or others said, oh yeah, to heck with it, let's just open the doors. These were very significant court challenges that made their way into the Supreme Court and were measured against sort of social needs, what were the implications, and it was found that no, that these lacked the integrity that we would need in any social policy. It was bringing more harm than good. You know, we kind of tipped over the scale, and in some pursuit of a higher morality, we had actually become quite immoral in doing this. I mean, you know, you can look now at the thousands of fentanyl deaths that are going on. It's all part of the same fabric. Cannabis is the tip of that, but it's all the same. We've marginalized people. We've left them to become the fodder, I guess, of gangs and gang life. And that's something that each of us, I think, as Canadians and myself as an adult, as an elder, maybe even in the community, I take a certain accountability for that. So I may not be involved in any of those lifestyles, but I see how harmful they are. And as an elder in my community, I feel it's imperative that I use my voice. This is where I look at our elected leaders here. It's imperative as leaders that they begin to use their voices to help the community understand that this is the better way in which to move, not to turn it over. We're finding so many of these. Oh, sorry, brother. But we have a community here that really could grab onto this and make some substantial improvements to the overall quality of their community. And that's what I would like to see. When we went about applying for our license, we did it long before I approached the township. My feelings were, in discussing this with my partner, is that we should wave the white flag. It's a very elaborate process. It's taken us 6 months to get through the first stage, and that has to do with security and integrity. They want to know everything that you have done. I think that's the paramount part, within this, is they're trying to separate those that were involved in more criminal enterprises and those that weren't. And so they look at, where have you lived for the last 20 years? They want to know everything. Where you've worked for the last 20 years. Where have your bank accounts been? What are your lenders? They want to know all of the fabric of your life. And that, for many people, could be challenging. If you've made your life through, a black market for any period of time, how are you going to show your income? And like I say, it might not also, and this should be well understood, is that the provincial government is not looking to target people who once maybe had an interest in a strictly cannabis market. So whether you were a dealer or a grower, you're best to admit that. Okay? They want to know this, but it doesn't mean that they're going to push you out. But they want to know, did you have other criminal enterprises? That's really what they're looking at as trying to remove from that. I think it's a very good thing. We're trying to build public trust in the process and in the policies, and hopefully that's something that would lead to it. The challenge, though, as I was touching on, is that provincially and federally, these levels of government haven't come out to educate the communities that are now going to have the stores. So they're not really aware of some of the circumstances revolving around this. All that I've had to go through, or anybody like me has to go through, to reveal that in fact you are positive for the community, that you're seen as a good candidate. So it took us 6 months to move through that. We did receive that approval. That then was forwarded on to the township of Langley, which is where we have our other store. At this point, though, it was pushed back to Victoria, saying, well, we haven't made any decisions yet. They seem to be taking some sort of a wait and see approach. I'm unclear what they're waiting to see, but nonetheless, that's where we're at. But no, the short answer is yes, we were able to pass it, flying colors. We are seen as a good candidate at this point. And then allowing now the city to say, okay, Hempyz has gone through the process, they've passed it, they can do all of their inquiries. That also didn't seem to be enough. I have contacted Mary Pollock, who is our local MLA here. She's the leader, I believe, of the Liberal Party provincially, as well as John Aldig, who is our federal MP, to talk with them and encourage them to come into the communities and work with me and others to educate, to help council and mayors understand that this is for the betterment. This is why it was brought in. Bill Blair, when he talks about it, and I find it funny that I quote him, but what he said is that in terms of cannabis policies, they brought in a strict regime to keep cannabis out of the hands of our youth and drug money out of the hands of criminals. Those are the two main tenets of what he's proposing. I would like that to be known within this community, that those aren't being lost or given up in exchange for people getting high. It's primary to everything. And as I say, for most of us, in fact, those of us that are harm reductionists, it's primary to our case too. It's always been about that. I don't favor adolescent, cannabis use or alcohol use. I don't like it being on the streets. I look at our adolescents right now, or our youth, they're being exposed to gangs and gang life every day. because we've left drugs out on the streets, and the streets are where the kids play. I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I would like to see kids getting their cannabis by stealing it from their parents, just like I stole alcohol and cigarettes from mine. That is really what we need to get back to. And the reason I say that is because when you stole from your parents, you could only take a little bit. You also couldn't turn it into a criminal enterprise where you could start selling to your friends. We have done that also with our children. We've allowed them to find jobs in the drug trade. That needs to change. At this moment, we do not have any stores. This is something that both councils and both Langleys are struggling with, is to bring it in. So what we have is we have 25,000 adults in this community who are current cannabis users. So, your question, where would they be purchasing at this moment? They're getting it off the streets. They're supporting black market. They're supporting organized crime. And these are very good people that are being driven into the hands of some very bad people. And this is the challenge and really why I'm out here. We're really trying to work with the city as well as the township of Langley to help them understand that right now we have, numbers range anywhere from 15 to 25% of adults in British Columbia are current cannabis users. So taking the Langleys, the two of them together, we're probably looking at anywhere from 25 to 40,000 individuals in this community that have no legal access to cannabis. And so the real question is, where are they getting it? And that's what we continue to ask, mayor and council and others, is why are you standing in the way of this? For many of us, it's always been a law and order issue. This is what harm reduction has always been about, is reducing the harm associated, with cannabis use or drugs in general. That was always what I felt was the mantra that was coming out from those that were, heading prohibition. That's what they really wanted. Now they have the opportunity to now take a hold of it, to pull it off of the streets, get it away from our children, and put it into regulated stores. I can't think of anything better for a community. I'm curious as to why they're not willing to move forward. And maybe I could say was it just morality? Maybe that's what it is. Time will tell. Typically, a lot of the grow ops that are happening are much smaller, they're mom and pops. Some of the violence that we might associate with it and be concerned about it would be the ones that are more associated with organized crime, where this is just a grow op is in addition to other criminal enterprises that they might be involved in. And in fact, this grow op might be the money that they need to finance some of their other criminal operations. And so I would say it is largely relegated there. I might not be able to speak to it conclusively, but in terms of the craft growers or the mom or pop growers, typically these were, people who were maybe themselves users that decided they wanted to grow, sell to their friends, maybe inadvertently. And this is another challenge that we have, is that the black market has really grabbed a hold over the last few years. And so much of this product that might have been growing by moms and pops that really ought to have stayed within the cannabis using community end up finding its way into the organized crime channel, because they now had this network of being able to move it. That's been the most substantial change. I mean, for somebody my age, I'm 65, there was a time when really the use of cannabis was something where it was, one hippie selling to another hippie, if you kind of look at it. The industry has changed dramatically today. It's much more violent. It's driven by sort of power, by all of these other enterprises. It's a very changed industry, and it's substantially over the last 5 or 10 years. I think most people would understand that if they watch the news, the deaths, the burning bodies, the whatever the hell you want to talk about. It's really changed the complexion. That is not what I believe we are as cannabis users or the cannabis using community. That isn't really what we're about, but that is how it has moved along. I'd like now that we've changed it, that we're starting to maybe look the other direction, and hopefully we can, see the betterment coming from this in time. The very best way to get cannabis off the streets and is to open up stores. This is really the challenge. When you talk about a supply chain, right now, these big investors, these LPs, they have thousands of pounds that are rotting in warehouses because we can't open stores. So when you talk about a supply chain issue and people are grumbling because the product is dry and it's old, of course, it'd be like if we tried to keep bread for a year, it'd be all moldy. So it needs to move along. So I also see municipalities are at the heart of the problem. They're bunging it up. It's like it's constipated. It can't move. So, but if we begin to allow this to flow through, I read some research recently, and I think this was BNN, Bloomberg, and they were doing an analysis on this having to do with just a commodity. What they have found is that individuals who are using cannabis for the first time are twice as likely to purchase through a regular retail store than to go to the black market. Reason why? They have no association with the black market. So what this indicates to me is that the moment that you remove the opportunity to associate, people don't. People don't seek out exposure. Most people, if they can do something legal, you have something over here, you can buy it legally, or you can go over here and you get it illegally. People don't. Where do people buy their cigarettes? Where do people buy alcohol? And you can buy both of those through illegal channels. Ask yourself, where are people purchasing it? They go and they buy it lawfully and they pay their taxes. So looking at that, this is really what we need to do. That is what's going to happen. It's a slower process, but we need to begin the process of undermining that and slowly bringing people over. Of course, there are individuals that have been around this market a long time that are a little disgruntled because it's not like the good old days. There's a part of this, and I kind of smile about it, is something about the outlaw life that I think many of us are going to miss. But it's done. I'm sure Billy the Kid sat around with the boys and it's just not going to be the same, is it? But I'm grateful. You know, it was a time, it was fun. Like I said, I'm an old hippie, great. But to remove the threats to the community, to individuals, that's paramount. That well exceeds me. And I think that's really what we've always talked about, we've always wanted to do. I think that's always been the dialogue. Decriminalize it, regulate it, damn it, I'll pay taxes. I'd love to. So they need to open this up. They need the tax flow to happen. I also caution many people that are trying to stand in the way of LPs in stores from the side of cannabis supporters. Their concern is that craft growers aren't being given a fair shot. Well, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna kind of play a bit of a devil's advocate. As long as the LPs have got tons of weed rotting on their shelves, there will not be room for the craft growers. We need the stores open. We need it moving through. The moment we do that, there will be room for the craft growers. That's what is so dependent. They say there's only 11 stores out of 99 that have passed the first scrutiny that have been allowed licensing. And that's not nearly enough. Alberta, my understanding is they have over 200 stores in Alberta. What do we got in BC? 10? 12? And we have in the Lower Mainland, Sunshine Coast, 2.4 million people, and I think there's 5 or 6 legal dispensaries for us. Wow. So each of them have to serve, well, let's say 25% of that. So you're looking at what? 750,000 people for half a dozen stores. Come on, that's ridiculous. So of course people are going to go back out and continue to purchase. So if they really want to come to the winning side, local governance, back the federal government. I personally don't understand why they feel that they have any right to do that. All municipalities, and I shouldn't say all, but what they have land use rights. They don't make law. They can't. They write bylaws. They can only support existing laws. Why they feel they can come in and somehow, ignore what's coming down the pipe from a federal level? I'm unclear as to where that authority comes from, or the belief that they have such authority. Bylaws, I guess, and they're postponing bringing in bylaws. When it comes to bylaws, if they decide we're just going to open it up, that's the bylaw. They don't have to go through any great hearing. They can actually say it's time. Comox over on the island, a little tiny community, is opening its second dispensary this week. And it's a town probably about the size of Langley. They've opened it up. If we're really going to deal with the problems that everybody has been concerned about, forget about your neighbor smoking weed, okay? That's a personal thing. What was your concern? Your concern was law and order. That was what it was. You were concerned about drugs on the streets. You were concerned about your children. You were concerned about those things. These are the policies that are intended to remedy that. Get out of your neighbor's life and his mind, and everything else will be fine.